So, Namaste India. Willkommen zusammen. Thank you for joining session 4 of S.H.E Summit 2020, a nonprofit initiative taken by Indians Entrepreneur Forum. See Her Empowered is an idea of bringing diverse cohort of Indo-German women entrepreneurs and successful leaders to share their journeys, challenges, and core principles around their business functions with well-seasoned professionals across the globe. I would like to welcome you all to this session on German Indian startup initiatives by Juliane Fromter, Program Director of Next Step India German Accelerator today. But before we proceed towards the session, I would like to introduce our chairman, Mr. Sanjay Tambe, and invite him to introduce Indian Entrepreneurs Forum to our participants today. Sanjay is not only a founder of this forum, but a seasoned management consultant with over 25 years of experience in serving multiple industry sectors like FMCG, IT, telecom, manufacturing, engineering, and financial services. He has decades of experience in due diligence, asset management, and restructuring for MNCs, as well as Mittelstand and family owned SMEs. He has been a coach, a mentor, and an investor himself in innovative startups from India and Europe in domains like food tech, medtech, healthcare, hospitality, and e commerce. So, welcome, Sanjay, and I give you the platform to also introduce IEF to the audience today.
Thank you, Neha. Welcome all. Welcome, Juliane. I'm very happy to present to you the Indian Entrepreneurs Forum, which is a platform renamed last year in November. It was initially installed as an Indo-German network to enable business enthusiasts from Germany and India to bring them together in helping each other, enabling each other to understand the German business environment, as well as to help them also understand how business can grow here. If you are doing any business between India and Germany, and how, as an entrepreneur, how you can basically get help in enabling your business, but also in general how to react between India and Germany. So it is not only for Indians; it is in general anyone who wants to join as an entrepreneur, who has something to do with between Europe and India. And we try to help them in terms of getting them on a network platform through our experience sharing, which we have all of us as patrons of this forum. And we have a non-profit character, so it is registered as a Verein, which you know in Germany. And the core aim and the target remains also to help and enable all these entrepreneurs as well as business enthusiasts. This series called S.H.E Summit, See Her Empowered, was idea of Neha. She herself is a global product manager at Infineon Technologies, as well as a marketing and digital coordinator for this forum and our Verein. And as well as he's an MBA student at TU München for innovation management. So I'm very happy and glad to have Neha on board, who's propagating this platform for women empowerment. So I see that in our crowd today there are 50-50 as of now, women and men. I think we don't have a majority as such, but we want to be actually enablers for everyone who is having a business mindset. We already had three wonderful speakers the last 3 days. Tomorrow is going to be our last day, so please remain with us also for tomorrow and join in. In case you have any friends, please try to promote this platform to them so that they can get help from this platform. Thank you, Neha. I'll hand over to you for this session. Wishing you a good exchange.
Thank you, Sanjay, for your kind words. I would also like to express my gratitude for Juliane today to join us for this session, despite of her extremely busy schedule. And I would like to begin this session by giving a short introduction about her on a professional side. So Juliane is an accomplished startup ecosystem leader and enabler with over 8 years of experience in the global startup ecosystem. She is in charge of Next Step India program and supports German startups to scale their businesses in India. She has worked on global startup ecosystem building support programs around international expansion, client acquisition, venture building, ecosystem building through program design, planning, and execution. She has supported 20 plus startups with India market entry strategy and access to clients to accelerate their scaling and impact their bottom line. Furthermore, She has shared in building 15 partnerships with global governments and enablement in support of Indian startups scaling abroad, including fundraising for these programs from the public sector. Welcome, Juliane, and thank you for joining this session. We will run this session for 45 minutes, and for the last 15 minutes will be reserved to ask questions from the audience that we have today. I definitely encourage our audience today to paste their questionnaire across the talk, whatever they have in the mind, in the chat box, which we will take towards the end of the session. With that, I'm extremely grateful, Juliane. Your energy is really contagious. And I really looking forward to spend this 1 hour with you all. And also the people here would be very excited to learn from you joining us in this initiative for S.H.E Summit. Welcome, Juliane.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks so much for having me today and for this sweet opportunity to talk a bit about my life and my experiences between Germany and India. Pleasure to be here today.
Pleasure is all ours, Juliane. Thank you for your kind comment here. Let's begin our session actually with a very interesting question. So, a few days back, when I actually picked up a phone and I got introduced to Juliane, I was really mesmerized to hear her story and journey, where she started from East Germany and now, leading a really global position within German Accelerator here. So, from early onset of the career, what were the life incidences, Juliane, that helped you mold, your dimension, professional dimension for coaching in entrepreneurship and mentoring in entrepreneurship today? What's your
Yeah.
life story?
Thanks a lot, Neha. As you rightly said, I grew up in the east of Germany, and I think, growing up in one system and then shifting to kind of another has made me very susceptible or sensitive to certain changes or changes in society, and I think that kind of reflects in much of the work I do today, and that whatever we call as normal is very subjective and may not be the same. And I think specifically in my work between Germany and India, you have to redefine normal on a daily basis. So I think that's one of the key aspects. But if I may come to some other aspects of my more professional career that have molded this. I started, working in retail banking after finishing school, mostly because my parents found that to be a good idea. And I think I was pretty clear from the beginning that this may not be what I'm going to be doing for life. But lucky enough, I went right into the dot-com bubble, and this whole experience became much more exciting than I initially thought. So this happened from 1999 to 2001. So this was quite an exciting time. And even when I left, I wasn't aware that this theme will bounce back into my life over and over. I decided then to study and bring an element of something that was very close to my heart into the mold. So I kind of figured, oh, the business world is kind of, I kind of like that, but I need something that, pokes my heart a little bit more. And at the time I was really intrigued with music and like spend all my free time on visiting concerts and all of that. And so I ventured into a career in music, and also my studies went kind of along that. And so I spent a couple of years there while I was studying. And by the end of my studies, this whole industry had collapsed. So that was my first experience with disruption or digital disruption. And it kind of went on like that. I moved into publishing, and that was the next industry to fall. And then I struggled around a bit before, more by accident than by choice, ended up in a sales job in IT. So that's when my tech experience started. I worked with EMC for about 4 years, going through the motions of adopting cloud and moving into that direction. So right from the start where this discussion happened, and ultimately I decided that the big corporate world is maybe not my place forever, and shifted to startups, working for cloud management startups in 2012. And from there, pace was a constant companion during this period. I was with 3 different cloud management startups in 3 years. And then I think this is worthwhile mentioning, then I took a pause. I was at a crossroads after finishing my executive MBA and figured I can't just continue like that, because that was like so fast paced, and I figured these are not my dreams. I have to reconnect with my own intentions for life. And I had a couple of points on my map, but they wouldn't quite connect. And so I took about a year to see how I can connect these dots, and was quite free floating in just networking in a different way, meeting new people, exploring new avenues, and ultimately trying to find out how I can apply my skills in a new way. And I had like social entrepreneurship on this map. And, sales was always like a thing that I eventually enjoyed doing a lot, just communicating with people, finding out what they really want and need, and following those things. And startups was definitely something that had to be there, but wasn't quite sure how this could connect. And I met a bunch of Indian students in Berlin in 2015, and we eventually organized a startup event in Hyderabad in 2016. And that was not my first, but my second visit to India. And then it kind of pulled me in. And yeah, the rest, I guess, we come to in other questions. But yeah, that's how my connection with India happened, and happy to share more in our conversation today about this.
That's glad to hear, because you're really working on an intersection between Germany and India. And you told that you have visited India. I think that's the interesting part, because not many people from this country actually visit India. So, how was your experiencing visit India? How long have you been there? Could you share some more insights to the audience here? What was your
Yeah.
experience there in India?
So I moved there in 2016 after visiting twice. So I probably had spent some 3 weeks before I decided to actually move. During this event that I just mentioned, I came to know about this initiative called T-Hub, which was quite a moonshot, quite aspirational project run by the Telangana government to catch up with Bangalore, I guess, and kind of reconnect with a mission of making Hyderabad or Telangana another go-to place for innovation, technology, etc. That has kind of emerged about like 10-15 years back, but because of the separation of Andhra Pradesh, I think it got kind of a hold up. So T-Hub came out as part of a variety of policies to basically catch up with that mission, and make the state more innovative. And yeah, inspiring 3 years is definitely what I can say about the time that I spent there. So I was there between 2016 and 2019, heading the internationalization activities of T-Hub. Yeah, so this was one of 3 major parts of the ecosystem building that we did. But from the incubation and also corporate acceleration, the internationalization piece was basically supporting Indian entrepreneurs in their endeavor to look for opportunities outside of India, but also helping international entrepreneurs to learn more about how to enter the Indian market.
Thank you, Juliane, for sharing interesting insights. That's more on T-Hub in few minutes. But coming to your personal experience there, I hope you also had some Hyderabadi biryani while you stayed there.
Plenty.
That's really good to hear, because Hyderabad without biryani is nothing. And but let's say in terms of people, in terms of living in India, people have a different impression of India. Probably some of that I would also blame to this movie of Slumdog Millionaire to an extent. But I would really like you to give your opinion about your personal experiences in India, travel experiences, also to the audience while you were there.
Yeah, no, I would say overall I have a very good experience. I'm back for a year now and I'm missing it a lot, especially since we can't travel right now. It's become I've become quite desperate of going back. So I think it has its own charm. It takes a while to grow on you. And I wouldn't say it was very easy. As I said, I came in 2016. And just to give you some anecdotes, maybe, of what experience means, right? It's often the small things day to day that make you either struggle or love it. And both of it is true all the time, I would say. Like it's overwhelming in the positive and negative ways as well. um, but when I first came, obviously you have to register, and you have to, make yourself like a resident. So there's all this like drama going on with going to the offices and stuff like that. So that's always interesting, I guess. No matter where you go in the world, but specifically so. um, and it took about 5 months, and without registration you can't have a bank account. So before I had a bank account, there was demonetization, and I was still getting my payment as cash. So when demonetization hit, I was like, I had no money, right? Because there was no digital way for me to deal with anything. So that was quite an existential thing when you have to go to work and suddenly you don't have any cash to, or like you can't use cash to pay your auto to work, right? So very substantial existential problems suddenly, and you happen to experience these kind of small things that you may not you can't envision them, or you can't really think of them when you're sitting here. But it kind of reflects a lot about like what the challenges may be when we deal with each other, between Germany and India. Um, like in our programs as well, we see sometimes people don't show up for meetings, or they're late for meetings. But these are exactly the reasons why, because the day to day is just so much more challenging and puts you under pressure in so many different ways that you don't experience over here. And yeah, part of my work is always to increase the awareness with our international entrepreneurs to understand these little things better.
Thank you, Juliane. Extremely interesting. And I can feel you because, as a native Indian, being faced with demonetization, I still remember, standing in a queue for ATM with a top up to get my cash out. So for somebody who's not from India, I think this is really, really a mess. And if you survive that, I think you can survive anything in India. Trust me.
Yeah. So
So,
yeah, definitely. So the whole experience makes you a lot stronger in so many
absolutely.
different ways. Yeah.
Absolutely. And for those who don't know about Juliane, actually, she has played amazing roles and in different startups from T Hub in Telangana to Ginsep in Germany, which is a very well-known organization as well, just like a German accelerator. So she has worked across length and breadth of these different incubation organizations. So, Yuliane, I think that would be very interesting to hear from you in terms of how these incubation centers, the work environment, the culture, the mindset of the people, how they are different in India compared to these organizations working here in Germany. What sort of also commonalities do you find here?
Yeah, I think I would like to start with differentiating the work a little bit and the purpose of these organizations. Um, T-Hub has been initiated as an ecosystem builder. So the initial purpose was to build the local ecosystem, right? And then we looked into like what is required for an ecosystem to be successful. And meanwhile, there's a lot of research and how this works, and all the ingredients that you need to put together to remold a Silicon Valley, if you want so, right? So I think T-Hub went into the depths of that kind of experience, looking like what is Telangana strong about, what are the industries that we need to focus on, building alliances with the corporate sector, with the academic sector, and just bringing like people together, and then subsequently building very targeted programs. As I mentioned before, incubation was just one of them, which is targeting the local startup scene, right? And then the corporate acceleration, which is really very strongly oriented with the work that corporates do in the open innovation space, which was a much more larger mission cross-country and even globally. And then the work around internationalization is obviously the furthest in the maturity of like when startups do what, right? So they go through this motion. So there was a whole like journey for the startups to go through, starting from incubation to eventually internationalize. When we look at these other two organizations like GINZEP and German Accelerator, they're very much focused in internationalization, right? And GINZEP is basically mostly a networking events platform for people to really come together, to mingle, to get to know each other. And the German Accelerator works across geographies, both in the US and Asia, to help entrepreneurs in a very programmatic fashion to capture the essence of these markets and then decide if they want to enter and then how to enter, right? So the missions are quite different here, but ultimately the work is still very similar, because it's always about collaborating, bringing new people into the mold, exciting people about what you're doing, what the startups are doing that you're working with, putting them in the forefront. Yeah, I think so. There's certain commonalities and differences, but yeah, ultimately, we are all in this together.
I'll go a little bit more specific on German Accelerator now, because you are now leading this Next Step India program there.
Yeah.
I think it would be very interesting for us to also get more insights on what this program is about and what sort of different domains or sectors primarily you are looking within this program for the audience.
Yeah, sure. So the German Accelerator overall is an initiative by the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. So they have a mission to support German startups to internationalize faster, better, and with less risk. So obviously for every startup, internationalization is one of the things that, have a very high risk factor. You can easily spend a lot of money and resources and times, and it doesn't really, lead to anything. What we also observe is that, many startups start spreading themselves very thin in this process if they don't work very focused on specific geographies that are kind of pre-qualified. So specifically with Next Step India, currently this is a market exploration format, which means it's a very early stage of evaluating if a market is interesting or not for expansion. So our startups may have like initial feelers of there's some traction with this market, there's some interest from this market, or they have read about certain policies that indicate to them maybe I should be looking at this market. And now they want to know more, but they don't really have any entry point. They don't have network, which is one of the key aspects for you to be successful, to move very organically. So this is basically the things that we try to provide with the program: data points on taking a de-risk decision in the internationalization context. It's a 6 weeks program where we focus on what pieces of the business model need to be localized and how we can build like a strong network around each of these startups to make their first steps in the market.
And Juliane, could I get more insights on, because, I think N number of startups would be applying for this Next Step India program, trying to get a seat and trying to get your mentorship. So what is the process of first getting into it? And once they get into it, how does the handholding process from your program begins, for example, for these startups?
First of all, we work on, predefined sectors. That does not necessarily mean we don't accept other startups that are outside of these sectors, but it helps us to promote the opportunities in Germany. So one thing to understand, it is not like there's hundreds of startups, wanting to enter the Indian market. So we're not there yet. In fact, when we initially started, I think across the board from everybody involved, our biggest concern was that we may not find startups that are keen to look at India. So part of our mission is to raise awareness, to give the startups a better feeling that, there's a lot of stuff that is possible. So part of our mission is really to show opportunity and possibility, right? And so we've also seen that the startups applying maturity has definitely increased over the last 3 issues. So we had 3 programs this year, and about 20 startups have participated in the program, which is quite significant, and we are all quite happy that this is a pretty good number. When it comes to the application process, you can just simply apply online. We typically have like an interview process with you. And certain things are relatively straightforward for me to judge, to say there's an opportunity or there's enough there to explore further. And if we ever have the feeling, or I have the feeling, I don't know this industry specifically well enough to judge, then I reach out to our mentor and partner network to further qualify if they see potential for this startup. So that's one thing, right? We want to make sure that we can also provide the relevant support for any startup in that context. There's obviously a lot of other organizations that are also there, that we do partner with and that we do collaborate with, including the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, GINSAP, as you rightfully said, and many others that help us in that process. And sometimes one of those organizations may be better suited to help someone than us. So the sectors that we have zoomed in, I think that may be interesting for the audience to know, is healthcare and life sciences, logistics and mobility, sustainability with an element of agriculture, even though that is not that strong in Germany. It's not a very wide ecosystem there in agri, but it's obviously very interesting in India. So I'm still hopeful that we can find the one or the other high-tech agri company that we can, apply in India. And then there is obviously the whole field of like emerging technologies, including cyber, cloud, AR, VR, AI, applied to a variety of industries, or topics like HR, marketing, and so on, that have like a strong B2B angle. Obviously, there is a lot of global innovation center work that happens in India, where Indian entities have a huge influence on what happens on a global level in multinationals. And so India is a very interesting entry point from that perspective for companies who have B2B tech, enterprise tech, etc. So we are in touch with many of the corporate accelerators in India to build these bridges into these corporates.
Thanks, Juliane, for sharing that. It also raises one question, because now these startups, let's say, for example, they might be in a very nascent stage, maybe looking for, a pre-seed, seed funding, or even crowdfunding, etc. Is your program also kind of doing matchmaking to the investors across borders, or let's say the program is not taking care of that part and sole startup is responsible for that?
Yeah, it's not a focus, I would say. It comes up occasionally, but there's multiple reasons why it is not. First of all, the program anyways is already very short. Like, I would always love to have more time with the startups, especially when things, appear to become very promising. I would always feel like I want another 6 weeks or another 6 months to do the work. And the other thing is that there is a certain complexity for Indian investors to invest in German startups. First of all, most Indian investment vehicles have a very strong Indian thesis. So their LPs would not be too happy to see too many of those international investments. So they can max out at somewhere around 10%. The other problem is I would be interested to do this work if it would directly benefit the market entry in India. But if the money comes to Germany to invest in the German entity, the money cannot easily flow back to India. And that's a hindrance. So that's a problem. So we need to find different ways. And GINZEP is doing a little bit of that work to get more Indian money into German investment companies, VCs. So maybe that's an angle to raise the awareness in the European ecosystem that India is indeed a market, because in many of the conversations initially where we were still trying to position the program and promote India, fortunately throughout this year this has changed a bit. I'm not really doing that anymore because we've had enough interest now. But there is a certain skepticism from German or European investors towards India because they don't have enough knowledge themselves, first of all. And secondly, they have their own set of experiences with India that make them skeptical in a way that we have to counter. So obviously India is not what it is, what it maybe was 10 years back. And so there is constant work that needs to happen on where India is moving, and India is moving fast, right? Like what has been true 3 years back is definitely not true today. And so there's a constant translation process going on in raising the awareness and spreading the word about the opportunities. And that's where breaking it down to sectors has been really helpful for us, because that's where the opportunity becomes tangible. Whereas if I just speak about India and there's so many people and so many consumers and so many mobile phones, that doesn't really, move anybody to enter this market. You need to talk about the opportunities in healthcare if you want to convince a healthcare startup, right?
True. It's like, there is a set notion that in the Indian market, because you have seen both the worlds, what is your perception on the fact that Indians are more conservative in investment and risk-taking capabilities when it comes to the startups compared to the German investors, or it's vice versa? Or what has been your experience with that? Or how, if you have some ideas how, this can be improved, or learning lessons from you?
That may have been true 3-4 years back. I don't think that's true anymore. I think India is moving extremely fast. I don't see the same pace in Germany, to be honest.
That's assuring to hear.
I give you one example, and that's a very, very basic example, and we can look at other things as well. But one example was when I came back, and like I'm not using food delivery apps a lot, but if you look at an Indian Swiggy, for example, and compare it with like a similar platform in Germany, this is night and day. Yeah, like a Swiggy or a Zomato, they innovate on a monthly basis. If I open such a platform in Germany, it still looks like 3 years back. I have not, there was no change. Zero. So if you look at that kind of movement, or in these like small things, I can't agree with you, your notion of things being slow in India. I think I can agree with this notion, like with when we look into the angel investment scene, there were a lot of business people who came from more traditional businesses initially. But I also think that has changed to a large degree. I think the current set of angel investors is very well informed, gathers in associations and forums and exchanges what's working, what's not working, and learning. So I think there were a lot of positive moves there. And I hope, that with the whole COVID event, that Germany is also catching up on this. Germany has been relatively slow with the whole digital transformation, But it seems that finally, some forceful events here are finally making Germany move as well. So I hope this also reflects in the investment scene. So I remain hopeful that eventually we all move at the same fast pace.
Positivity at its best. Juliane, you had been so closely working with these startups, throughout your course of the professional career that also, kind of forces me to ask you, have you ever thought about opening your own company at any one point in time and looked into that direction of being an entrepreneur yourself?
I think that's a constant sort of. I think it's kind of there. That idea is definitely there to a degree. Um, it may not necessarily be a startup, but very much in a similar field of support. Yeah. But I think it's always a matter of like, the right people coming together, developing a joint vision and things like that. And, as I mentioned earlier, we still have a couple of things to do here in terms of moving the Next Step India program forward and working on, building out a European vehicle to do the same work. So I think for the next few years, we're going to be busy with that. So yeah, while it's on my mind, it's not an immediate one.
How would you coin, or what is your definition of a good startup, and how this is reflected into the qualities of a founder or a co-founder when you are, also evaluating a specific startup for the different programs within German Accelerator?
Yeah, what is a good startup? And there's many things, right? There's many things that I look for. The founder is definitely, or the founders is definitely one element that I'm always looking at. The way they can articulate their vision. Is there a bigger vision also out there than their immediate go-to-market? Is there something fundamental that they want to change about the way we do things in the world? That's definitely that's the startups that do inspire me ultimately. And yeah, the other things is obviously, so since I have this very strong sales background, is all about like how you can articulate your pitch. Can this resonate? Do you have like a message that hits on multiple layers? So for example, we do have a good number of sustainability startups in our current batch, and that's always a difficult one, right? If you purely come with a mission to um, purely increase sustainability, you may find a lot of hesitance from business leaders to implement just because there is something green there, right? So you also need a very strong economical message. So if you can combine both and tell me how you save CO2 emissions while saving money for the organization, these are good pitches. So you need like a conclusive and far-reaching messaging here to actually convince people. And we've seen really good messaging recently, where people basically, they can't say no. If you impact the bottom line and you save CO2 emissions at the same time, like who says no to that, right?
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. One more question that comes into my mind, because now being as a startup, let's say I am from the startup side and you mentoring me as a women leader, how was that function as being a women entity, kind of mentoring these startups was perceived by the startups, or did you feel differently ever?
I don't know. I've heard this question before. I don't generally spend too much time on thinking about the fact that I'm a woman unless somebody makes me feel that this is awkward to them. I don't really care, and that's probably also based on me coming from East Germany. My mom was always working. It was never a question to me. I never questioned my ability or role in, or like ability to play a role. Um, so I don't think it's something that I think about a lot. It's something that people asked me quite a bit when I was in India. And ultimately, I figured even talking about it is kind of awkward to me. Like giving like a manual or something how to do that is I don't resonate because it is kind of natural. And I think I concluded eventually the best way of doing it is just really doing it and being there and being an example and not shying back from voicing your opinion and playing a role really. Yeah.
That's actually a very great thought, Juliane. Thanks for sharing that, and especially that attitude, to the audience today, that we really don't have to think differently. We just have to act like a normal leader would. I think that's really a core that as women leaders, we really have to separate the word women and we have to think about ourselves as leaders today. But let's say I am Genie now. I'll take a Genie role for you. And if I give you, let's say, one thing to change in the startup world that you are in today, and take an innovative initiative that you have the full freedom to drive and make a difference in the world, what would be that? And what would you like to change in that ecosystem?
Um, I think it's the problems that we are working on. And that's, I would say, specifically true for European entrepreneurs and probably I would say Western entrepreneurs. We work on a lot of things that I don't perceive as actual problems. And sometimes even to the degree that our like supposed problem solving just creates more problems in the world. So if I were to wish, and I think you can guess that already, I think sustainability, climate change is definitely something that we need to work on. There has been a series of publications, articles, etc., recently that has, spoken to the fact that with every month, with every year that passes where we don't act, acting will become more expensive. So I think what I wish for is that, that acceleration programs in this world really identify this as the next thing to do. Honestly, I'm very hopeful because I've been talking to a couple of large corporates who've made this like a big vision for the next 5 to 10 years. So I look forward to, working with these leaders as well in just increasing the pace of go to market. And that's specifically for like German and possibly European entrepreneurs. We have a lot of, security system around early funding from governments, etc. And while I do appreciate that, it doesn't come with enough demand on moving fast. Yeah, and also the support systems that can actually make them move fast. If I speak to startups that have worked on their idea for 3 years, they haven't spoken to one single client. That's depressing. That means there wasn't anybody telling them that that's what they should be doing. And while their technology may be great, it will not help them to bring, change to the world. And so, yeah, I would want to see more action around that problem, more sensitivity, to really working on acceleration and not just carrying that name on programs, but actually doing the work. So one of my, core activities for the program is the matchmaking, because I want to see these startups in front of people who actually take decisions and who can make change happen, adopt these solutions, put them into practice, and yeah, ultimately, yeah, save this save this planet probably.
That's a very noble thought. I think great ideas should survive, shouldn't go to a bias. I think they really need a platform to have a chance to kind of raise the voice and pitch the idea and open up their minds. Thank you, Juliane, for sharing that. So I hope as a genie one day, I grant your wish that and it comes true for the greater good of the world. And last but not the least, from my side, I have just one question of curiosity. Where do you see in the business of startup accelerator or even personally growing yourself in 5 years down the lane?
Difficult question, and I hate this question when it comes up in interviews. I tell you, because I've never operated from that place. I think I wouldn't be where I am today if I would have that 5-year plan in my mind, because I was always flexible enough to jump on opportunities that came in front of me. I'm doing what I'm doing today. And I think it's more so important in this world that keeps changing so rapidly. I have no idea what's going to happen in 5 years. So in this pandemic, even we don't know what's happening in 5 months from now. So I don't concern myself too much with that question. But being open to opportunities that come along the way, seeing opportunity in collaborating with people, and see what kind of bigger vision we can draw together.
Take life as it comes, right?
Yeah, and if that can be the bottom line of what I learned from India as well, in a much bigger way, I think that's also very true.
Thank you, Juliane, for actually sharing a lot of great insights about yourself, your personal journey, Next Step India, a totally international, let's say, initiative that you're driving within the core of Germany. And it was really amazing to have you also today here speaking, heart to heart with our audience. Any last key messages that you would like to give to the audience, from your experience sharing that we can take as, our takeaways or mantras today?
Yeah, sure. I think a couple of the things then that beyond what I just said, but that I learned from my time in India, working with T Hub, specifically because I think this was a very transformational experience for me. And a couple of those things are like dream big. Like when we initially started, I think we never thought like, some of the things were even possible, but we just threw them out. And actually by just talking about what we are dreaming of, you will find people that, want to support where you're going, and that, requires that you're able to draw out a vision that people can buy into, that is inspiring to people. And yeah, so these are some core things that I learned during my time there. On the other side, it's also important to be able to execute and deliver. So you cannot just dream; you also need to you need to bring stuff to the table, right? And that also needs to happen relatively fast. So you see, there's a lot of things that keep repeating when I speak about these things, and I think these, as you rightfully said, they become mantras to a degree, and they guide me in my work, and I hope they can add value to some of our audience's thoughts and actions as well.
Thank you, Juliane, for sharing amazing words. If you may allow me, we have quite some questions in the chat box, very specific ones, and maybe we can run this through you. So I'll start from the bottom to top. Across the world, COVID has led to lots of early stage startups to shut down or cut down their growth. How could accelerators help in this time?
Yeah, I think there's a very varied answer to this, because there's so many different accelerators, and they may be able to help in different ways. I do think a sounding board is always good, to redirect your thoughts. A lot of startups have to change course, and it's good if you don't just stick to your own bubble, but speak to as many people as possible. What we've seen specifically in our field of work on internationalization, actually, it gave a lot of people an opportunity to participate in our programs without traveling, and just get exposed, get prepared, to basically stack up knowledge once we are opening again, and having strategy laid out there. So I think one thing is really preparing, thinking through different avenues that are possible, and focusing your work there. Ultimately, obviously, programs like ours, or like laying out a new path, needs to be sanitized with investors, advisors, etc. So I think, the more inputs you can gather from different places, that's always, appreciated by startups.
Thank you, Juliane. Hopefully, the answer was satisfactory. The second question is, are you looking at joining hands with startups of Indian German origin who want to do pretty much the same thing as German Accelerator is doing? For example, be an ecosystem builder for Indian and German startups at various stages of development and help them open up channels in both countries to do business.
Difficult to answer, I would say. Depends. It depends. I gave a consultant answer here. Would definitely depend on the, scope of work, etc. And the way we can collaborate, and like how it basically feeds into each other's mission and vision for the work. We generally do speak with like everyone in the ecosystem who does similar work. Obviously, there is certain limitations to it, considering that we are a government program. So if you are like a more commercial player, there are certain limitations that I just have to look at when we collaborate.
Thank you, Juliane. The next question that we have is, are you working closely to any Indian chapters or organizations on similar lines? Do you connect with family offices in India like Ambani's, Tata's, Adani, Mittals, and so on? What can a German startup expect from such big names in India?
Since family offices would mostly fall under the spectrum of investors, it is, as I said, not necessarily a factor or like a focus. We do work with these companies' innovation offices, though, often. Yeah, so we speak to Adani, Geo, and so on. We do. Absolutely. The expectations are very different for each of them, to be honest. Like some have very strict programs themselves, so sometimes it's like quite some negotiation for us to find out like how we can fit into that, because they have like predefined problem statements, and if your problem solving doesn't exactly fit, then they don't know exactly what to do with you. So my job is to find out about all these things and to find the entrance points, right? So I understand my job as, yes, India is difficult and there's so many things, happening. But I'm trying to understand what any one specific startup needs, and then, find these small little gaps that are there and find the people who want to have that conversation, right? So for me, I'm talking to all of them, and ultimately I will find those who are open to a conversation, and also share their wisdom with the startups, because ultimately in these early stages it's not always about immediately collaborating, but firstly understanding what do Indian customers want from me, right? Like how do they operate, how do they look at that problem? Is there something different about the problem when you look at it from an Indian perspective? Yeah. So I think I missed the first part of those like three questions. If you
Are you working closely to any Indian chapters or organizations on similar line? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
so
similar
yeah,
question that came up is like, do you know something similar to German Accelerator in India, for example, like your counterpart?
yeah. So I can elaborate a little bit on this. First of, yeah, we do collaborate with all the NASCOMs, with a variety of incubators, etc., right? So this is there. There's huge interest from all of them to send Indian startups to Germany or Europe. And we would love to do that. We are not quite there yet, apart from GINZEP, which I said is not exactly like a very programmatic approach to the problem, but they do certain matching activities. So that's your first address for if you are an Indian startup and want to look at Germany, GINZEP, yeah. Apart from that, we do evaluate if the Indian government can come in a similar capacity to sponsor like a reverse element, but obviously, and that's how like you spoke about the experience of like raising funds for these kind of programs from a variety of governments. This is because every government is responsible for their own startups. And taxpayer money ultimately will only be deployed to startups from their own geography. So as Germany, we cannot exactly finance such initiatives while we are willing to execute them here in Germany. So come, yeah, like we are open, like let's do it. But there is an element of lobbying that has to happen on the Indian side.
Absolutely. Having seen the Indian startup ecosystems closely, which ones have caught your attention based on the different sectors that you have mentioned is your core focuses?
I think the big four are definitely there, and then there's a couple of smaller ones that come up really rapidly. I guess like Bangalore is always there, and as well Delhi, Hyderabad, Mumbai, followed by places like Chennai, Pune, Kerala, to a smaller degree, Goa, there's as well Gujarat, and many states. Like I think almost 2/3 of states have now a very valid innovation policy, and they're like very strong in executing this. There's stronger and stronger signals that a lot of tier 2, tier 3 cities are catching up on innovation. So it's difficult to say, and the quality is just increasing. I would say every 6 months you see like changes happening. So I have no that this is on a good path. I'm absolutely confident that this will prevail. Um, and the I'm only hearing good news from India. Despite the whole pandemic, people are optimistic, motivated, change direction very quickly. So yeah, I'm optimistic.
I'll take last question, Juliane, for the evening for you now. The last one is how different it is for only Indian startups compared to having a German in the team with retrospect of visa conditions.
You mean an Indian startup if they have a
A German,
German?
yeah. And can he be absorbed very easily, or there are process-oriented visa issues, for example, that you have seen, or even if you have seen such a case to kind of
Are we talking about an Indian startup with a German? And then which
how
way do they want the visa?
a German startup with Indian investors, and if we are all students, a German
Repeat it.
startup, a
German
German
startup.
startup with Indian investors. Maybe I'll repeat the question. Maybe somebody can unmute this person, Jaisal, to speak for himself.
Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we are a group of 5 students right now in Germany. It's placed in different universities across Germany, and we are going to be starting a company very soon. Probably January is what we are looking for. We are being invested into with a German company. It is an Indian company which is working on a properly large scale, and they would like to expand into Germany with us, so we being the front of that company for Europe. So we take sort of for an example, we take up boilers that are manufactured in India, and we distribute them in Germany for the brand. So that's the idea. So
So
how
first of all, for me, this is like while you may be starting up, I would not call this a startup. I would
yeah,
call this a
not
sales
exactly,
office.
yeah.
which may be like slightly different also from a visa perspective. I'm not a visa expert, to be honest.
Yeah.
And again, this is the opposite direction than what we are usually dealing with.
Okay.
So currently, I would assume you're on your student visa, so that should serve you for some time. I don't know if like
No, we're looking forward to being graduated in January, so
in
that's
January,
yeah,
right?
that's exactly
And
when we register.
being an entrepreneur typically allows you to have like a business visa relatively easily, like no matter which kind of business you do.
Okay.
I am not fully aware if you may need to leave the country and then reapply. That may be the case for some
Yeah.
of the visas.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, I'm not a visa specialist
Yeah.
to give you a legally
Yeah, no, no,
sign
but
off.
in general, even if you need to start up, you need to get like
I
administration
would
sorted
I
out.
would
And yeah,
highly recommend you talk to Ginzep. They would
Ginza.
have had these kind of scenarios a lot more often than we see that. And
Okay.
I know that they have helped some entrepreneurs in certain challenging situation, but I don't necessarily
Okay.
see that this will be too challenging.
Okay. Or
It would obviously be problematic if you have to travel back at this point in time,
yeah,
with the pandemic going on.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so yeah, but I would, yeah, for a final answer, I would inquire with the visa office itself.
Okay. All right.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Juliane.
much.
And Jay, if you have still some questions unanswered, we can also pitch in. Please leave us an email with any sort of your inquiry on
Definitely.
info@iefgermany.com, and we'll see
Yes.
what we have in our network to help you further.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so
Perfect.
much. Yeah.
Thank you. No problem. Thanks for your question. So, with that, Juliane, thank you very much for such an interesting talk and so much of openness from your side to talk about, the situations of the startup ecosystems in Germany and India, and also sharing your experiences working on this intersection with us. I am extremely grateful, and I was also, very much impressed by talking with you and your vision and your attitude specifically. So hats off to that, and thank you very much. Dhanyawad.
Neha, thanks a lot. Thanks, Sanjay, for inviting me today. This was a pleasure. It was good fun. Thanks a lot.
Yes, Julian, I have to say also thank you from IEF. You are an accelerator. That means you add fuel, or you guide us in not having speed breakers in our company, because it's an accelerator program. And we are very actually thankful to have you here on today's talk, that you could share your insights into Indo-German space. As a platform, Indian Entrepreneurs Forum is a networking platform. So all of you feel free to get in touch with us. We'll connect you with the ecosystem required. We see us as absolutely as enablers, and like I said already before, experience sharing platform where you can learn from and also get a guidance for how to grow a business, or get in connection to funds, legal problems, business issues, as startup people, connecting to business people, and working with each other to help each other in the Indo-German space. So thanks a lot for this wonderful evening, and thank you, Neha, for moderating this, also fantastically navigating us through this afternoon. And thanks to my team, Rohit and Sauradeep, who have been technically sound so that we could get this across today. Thank you, all of you. See you tomorrow for tomorrow's session at 4 o'clock. Tomorrow is the last session where we also have a big personality from 4 to 5. Ishitaji Agarwal, she's heading the Niti Ayog's Atal Innovation Mission. So please join us tomorrow. And in case you have any friends who would, you think that they would also find it interesting, please tell them to join. It's like a global event. Anyone can, anywhere from the world, corner of the world can join. So please share the link with them, the Zoom link which you have already got, and let them come in. Tomorrow is the last session of this S.H.E Summit. Thank you. See you tomorrow. Bye.